Margaret, 74, sits in her sunlit living room, surrounded by only what she truly loves. She wasn't always this free. Once, every drawer overflowed with memories, each item whispering, "Keep me, just in case." But then came the moment she never expected, the painful realization that holding on was holding her back. Decluttering isn't just about stuff. It's about identity, loss, and courage. Seniors who face this journey share their hardest lessons, starting with one truth no one warns you about. Letting go isn't as simple as it sounds. 1. Letting go isn't just about things. It's about identity. Margaret thought decluttering would be easy, just a matter of deciding what stayed and what went. But as she stood in front of her overflowing closet, a strange unease settled in. It wasn't just fabric and buttons she was sorting through. It was versions of herself. The elegant dresses from her career days, the worn-out gardening overalls, the cozy sweaters from winters spent with her late husband. Every piece held a story, a part of who she had been. She hesitated over a floral dress she hadn't worn in years, but once adored. The question wasn't, "Do I still wear this?" but "Who was I when I wore this? And am I ready to say goodbye to that woman?" For seniors, decluttering isn't just about creating space. It's about facing the past and deciding which pieces of it will accompany them into the future. Margaret realized that letting go wasn't just an act of tidying up. It was an act of redefining who she was now. 2. Decluttering brings up unexpected emotions, grief, nostalgia, even regret. Margaret's plan was simple: start with one box at a time. But she wasn't prepared for the wave of emotions each item carried. As she sifted through an old jewelry box, she found a necklace her mother had given her decades ago. The moment she held it, she felt a lump in her throat. It had been years since she lost her mother, but somehow the weight of that necklace brought the loss rushing back. Tucked between old birthday cards, she found a postcard from a friend she had lost touch with. A pang of regret hit her. How had she let that friendship fade? There were photographs, letters, little keepsakes she had forgotten about, yet each one reignited memories she wasn't sure she was ready to face. No one warns you that decluttering can feel like flipping through the pages of your life, reliving joys and heartbreaks all at once. It's not just about getting rid of clutter. It's about making peace with the past, deciding what to hold on to, and allowing yourself to grieve what's already gone. 3. You don't have to do it alone. Finding support makes all the difference. Margaret thought she had to do it all on her own. Decluttering felt like a personal journey, one she had to navigate in solitude. But as she sat surrounded by piles of old belongings, the weight of it became overwhelming. She didn't just need a second pair of hands, she needed support. One afternoon, her daughter, Claire, stopped by and noticed the hesitation in her mother's eyes. "Why don't we go through it together?" she offered. At first, Margaret resisted. She feared Claire would rush her, push her to get rid of things she wasn't ready to part with. But as they sorted through the attic, something unexpected happened. Claire listened to the stories behind each item, asked questions, and even encouraged Margaret to keep the things that still brought her joy. It wasn't about discarding everything. It was about making conscious choices together. With each shared memory, the process became less about loss and more about connection. Margaret also found comfort in speaking with friends who had been through the same journey. One of them, a neighbor, recommended a local decluttering support group. Hearing others share their struggles made her feel less alone, and their encouragement gave her the strength to continue. Decluttering is an emotional process, and it doesn't have to be faced alone. Whether it's a loved one, a friend, or even a community group, support can make the difference between feeling stuck in the past and confidently stepping into the future. 4. "One day I'll need this" is often a trap, but sometimes it's true. Margaret had made progress. She had confronted the emotions tied to her belongings, embraced the support of loved ones, and started letting go. But as she moved deeper into the decluttering process, she faced a familiar mental roadblock, the belief that she might need something again someday. She held an old set of fine china, tucked away in a cabinet for years. She never used it, yet the thought of parting with it made her uneasy. What if I host a dinner party? What if the family wants it later? But deep down, she knew the truth. She hadn't hosted a dinner in years, and her daughter had her own set. Keeping it wasn't about practicality. It was about a past version of herself that she wasn't quite ready to release. At the same time, Margaret realized that some items truly were worth keeping. Her late husband's toolbox, for instance, still had a purpose. Though she no longer used it regularly, it held sentimental and practical value. Her grandson had even begun learning to fix things with it. Decluttering wasn't about blindly throwing things away. It was about recognizing what still served her life and what only cluttered her space. The idea that everything must go is just as misleading as the belief that everything must be kept. The real challenge lies in knowing the difference. 5. The idea that you must declutter. Everything at once is a myth. Margaret had once believed that decluttering should be done in one big sweep, a dramatic purge that would leave her home light and free overnight. But when she tried, exhaustion set in fast. Sorting through years of possessions wasn't just physically draining, it was emotionally overwhelming. She started by tackling her bookshelves, assuming it would be an easy task. But every book had a story. Some reminded her of vacations, others of late nights lost in a gripping tale. Hours passed, and she had barely made a dent. The thought of tackling the entire house at this pace felt impossible. A neighbor, who had recently downsized, shared a different approach, decluttering in stages. Instead of forcing a massive overhaul, she could work in smaller, manageable chunks. Margaret took this advice and adjusted her mindset. Instead of attacking an entire room, she picked one category, winter clothing. She focused only on that, making decisions without the pressure of an unrealistic deadline. Slowly, she realized that decluttering wasn't a race. It was a process of making peace with the past while shaping the future. One day, one step, one decision at a time. The idea that decluttering must be done in a single dramatic event is a myth, one that leads to burnout instead of success. 6. Minimalism isn't for everyone. Decluttering should fit your lifestyle, not someone else's trend. Everywhere Margaret looked, she saw articles and TV shows preaching the benefits of minimalism. Only own what you can carry in one suitcase. A house should be nearly empty to feel peaceful. The pressure to embrace extreme decluttering made her uneasy. She didn't want to live in a home that felt like a hotel room. She wanted warmth, character, and pieces of her story around her. She remembered a friend who had gone all in on minimalism, donating almost everything she owned. At first, she raved about how freeing it felt. But months later, she admitted to Margaret that she regretted some of those choices. She had given away things she genuinely loved, not just excess clutter. Margaret took a different approach. She focused on intentional decluttering, keeping what added value to her life while releasing the rest. Her home didn't need to be bare. It needed to reflect her. Instead of following strict minimalist rules, she embraced balance. She kept her antique clock because it brought her joy, but she donated kitchen gadgets she never used. Decluttering isn't about following a trend. It's about creating a space that suits your life, your needs, and your happiness. What works for one person may not work for another, and that's perfectly okay. 7. What to do when sentimental items feel impossible to let go of. With each box Margaret sorted through, she grew more confident in her ability to declutter. She had let go of unnecessary things, embraced a process that suited her, and resisted the pressure of extreme minimalism. But then she reached the hardest category: sentimental items. Tucked away in a storage bin were her late husband's old fishing hat, a collection of postcards from her travels, and a bundle of handwritten letters from friends long gone. These weren't just things. They were connections to the people and moments that had shaped her life. The thought of parting with them felt like erasing pieces of her history. She picked up an old sweater her husband used to wear. It still carried the faintest trace of his cologne, and just holding it made her chest tighten. How could she possibly part with something so deeply personal? She set it back down, realizing that not every sentimental item had to go, but some choices would have to be made. Decluttering sentimental belongings requires a different kind of strength, one that isn't just about physical space, but emotional readiness. The real challenge isn't deciding what to keep, but accepting what those items represent and how they continue to shape the present. 8. The guilt of throwing away. Gifts or inherited belongings, and how to deal with it. Margaret had always believed that gifts should be cherished, even long after their usefulness had faded. Every birthday, holiday, and anniversary brought another sentimental item into her home, many of which she never used but felt obligated to keep. Then there were the family heirlooms: a heavy oak dresser from her grandmother, a set of delicate teacups from an aunt she barely remembered, a decorative vase that had been passed down for generations. None of these things fit her style or needs, yet every time she considered letting them go, a wave of guilt swept over her. She thought about the people who had given her these items. Would they be hurt if they knew she was donating them? Did parting with an heirloom mean she was disrespecting her ancestors? The questions nagged at her, making it difficult to make a decision. But then she realized something important. Her loved ones had given her these things as an expression of care, not as a lifelong obligation. The meaning of a gift isn't in the object itself, but in the memory of the relationship. Keeping something out of guilt wasn't honoring her family. It was creating an unnecessary burden. The hardest lesson in decluttering isn't just about choosing what to keep. It's about releasing the weight of guilt that often comes with letting go. 9. The reality of downsizing: how to choose what truly matters. Margaret had spent decades in the same home, filling every room with memories, books, decorations, and furniture collected over the years. But with each passing year, the house felt larger and harder to maintain. The thought of moving to a smaller place was both practical and heartbreaking. Downsizing wasn't just about reducing possessions. It was about reshaping her entire way of living. She started by imagining her new space. What did she truly need? What did she actually use? As she walked through each room, she noticed how many things she had kept out of habit rather than necessity. That extra set of chairs for just-in-case guests who never came. The stacks of linens that had been untouched for years. The formal dining table that no longer saw family gatherings like it once had. Sorting through these belongings forced her to ask tough questions. Did she want to spend her days maintaining things she didn't use? Did she want her new home to feel fresh and open, or cluttered with remnants of a life she had already outgrown? The hardest part of downsizing wasn't just packing boxes, it was making peace with change. Every decision brought her closer to a simpler, freer way of living, and as difficult as it was, she knew deep down that choosing what truly mattered wasn't about loss. It was about creating space for the future. Decluttering can change your mindset, not just your space. Margaret had reached a point in her decluttering journey where her home looked noticeably different. The heavy furniture that once filled every corner was gone. Closets, once stuffed to the brim, now had breathing room. Yet the most surprising transformation wasn't in her home. it was in her mind. For years, clutter had been more than just physical objects. It had been mental noise. Stacks of unread books reminded her of things she should have done. Drawers filled with unfinished projects whispered one day. Every item she had held on to for decades carried a weight of expectations, unfinished stories, and lingering emotions. As her space cleared, so did her thoughts. She felt lighter, as if the burden of the past had finally been lifted. Her mornings felt easier without the visual overwhelm of clutter. She spent less time searching for things and more time enjoying the present moment. She realized that decluttering wasn't just about organizing a home. It was about decluttering the mind. A clearer space had led to a clearer outlook on life, where she felt more in control, at peace, and fully present in each day. 11. The surprising freedom of having less. Not just physically, but emotionally. Margaret had never considered herself materialistic, yet she had surrounded herself with an abundance of things. Every object had been kept just in case. Extra blankets, dozens of plates, and more clothes than she could ever wear. But as she let go of excess, something unexpected happened. She felt free. Owning less meant fewer things to clean, organize, or worry about. With each unnecessary item gone, she found herself feeling lighter. She no longer carried the emotional burden of belongings tied to guilt, regret, or obligation. Beyond the physical relief, she also felt a shift in her emotional well-being. She spent less time maintaining things and more time doing what she loved. She rediscovered simple joys, reading in her favorite chair without piles of paperwork beside her, enjoying a cup of tea in a space that felt open and calming. Letting go of excess wasn't about loss. It was about reclaiming time, energy, and peace of mind. For the first time in years, she felt like she was truly living in her home, not just managing it. 12. Letting go can help you reconnect with your past in a healthier way. Margaret had always feared that letting go of certain belongings meant letting go of the memories attached to them. She had kept boxes of old photographs, handwritten letters, and souvenirs from past travels, worried that without them, the experiences would fade. But as she carefully sorted through them, she realized that memories weren't stored in objects. They were stored in her heart and mind. She found ways to honor the past without being weighed down by it. She selected a few special keepsakes and displayed them meaningfully, rather than keeping everything hidden in storage. She scanned old letters and created a digital album of cherished photos, ensuring she could revisit them without the clutter. Most importantly, she found that by clearing space, she made room for new experiences. Instead of holding on to the past out of fear, she embraced it with gratitude, knowing that the best way to honor it was to live fully in the present. 13. How to avoid regret. After decluttering with her home transformed, Margaret felt a newfound sense of clarity, but lingering doubts crept in. Had she made the right decisions? Would she wake up one day and regret letting go of something meaningful? The fear of making a mistake loomed over her, a final challenge in her decluttering journey. She revisited the few sentimental items she had chosen to keep and reassured herself that they held real value in her life. She reminded herself that she had been intentional, choosing what to keep, not just what to discard. Yet she couldn't shake the discomfort of wondering if something she let go of would be missed in the future. To ease this fear, she developed a strategy, taking photos of certain items before parting with them, writing down the stories behind the most cherished pieces, and giving special belongings to loved ones who would appreciate them. She realized that regret often comes from uncertainty, not the act of decluttering itself. The key was to trust the process, knowing that she had honored her memories in ways that didn't require physical clutter. Decluttering was not about erasing the past, but about making peace with it. The confidence to let go, came from understanding that memories are never truly lost. They live in the experiences, lessons, and relationships that continue to shape life. 14. Decluttering is an ongoing journey. Margaret had assumed that once she finished decluttering, the process would be complete. But she quickly realized that maintaining a clutter-free space required continuous effort. New things would always come into her life, gifts from friends, impulse purchases, or sentimental mementos from future experiences. If she wasn't mindful, clutter could creep back in. She recognized the importance of developing new habits. She started questioning each new item before bringing it into her home. Did she truly need it? Would it add value to her life? Could it replace something rather than add to the collection? These small decisions helped her maintain the balance she had worked so hard to achieve. She also established a routine, a monthly check-in where she reassessed her space. She no longer viewed decluttering as a daunting task, but as a simple, ongoing practice. By staying mindful, she prevented clutter from building up again. Rather than seeing decluttering as a final destination, she embraced it as part of a lifestyle. The sense of freedom and lightness she had gained wasn't just about what she had removed. It was about the mindset she had developed along the way. 15. The best lesson of all. Decluttering can help you embrace the future with open arms. Margaret's journey had begun with a simple goal: to create a more organized home. But as she reflected on how far she had come, she realized that decluttering had done more than just clear her space. It had prepared her for the future. Letting go of the past had made room for new possibilities. She felt more present in her daily life, more open to experiences, and more willing to embrace change. She no longer held on to things out of fear or guilt. Instead, she made decisions with clarity and confidence. As she stood in her decluttered home, she saw not just an organized space, but a reflection of her growth. She had shed the weight of unnecessary belongings, but more importantly, she had released emotional burdens that had held her back. The future no longer felt uncertain or overwhelming. It felt open, full of opportunity, and entirely hers to embrace. Decluttering isn't just about tidying up. It's about reclaiming your space, your peace, and your future. Margaret's journey proves that letting go isn't about loss, but about making room for what truly matters. Now, it's your turn. Start small, trust the process, and embrace the freedom waiting on the other side.